love to read, and so they give me books about people that also love to read. And so I have to say that every time I pick up one of these books, I'm sort of like, oh, I've already read it. You know, you kind of think that once you've read a book that's similar like this, that they're all the same. This one is not, which is why I picked it out. So the title is How 50 Great Books and 2 Not So Great Ones Saved My Life. And there is this piece in this that I am not going to give it away, but he sort of does in that title, so just guess. If he says saved my life, maybe there's some sort of validity to that. What's lovely about this is that Andy Miller is, first of all, he's British, so the entire thing has that British wit, where I literally was calling people and like, you have to listen to this! Because I think British humor is so wonderful because it's not dumbed down. It's this like amazing British wit, and he does books that most of us know. So he literally had this thing where he loved to talk about books. He was a journalist, he did critiques, and then he had children. And he still talked to people about how much he loved books. And he would realize that he's talking about books, and then he somehow realized that in 7 years he had read one, all the way through. And he kept talking about books like he loved books, and he realized he hadn't actually sat down and read one for an incredibly long time. And he had this whole thing where he said, I cannot actually love my children more than books. I will not be that person. And I love that. So he said, I am going to love books more, not my children. And so we did this thing where he chose books over children. Oh no, he didn't, but a little bit. And he got back to reading, and at his 40th birthday, he said, I'm going to read 50 books, and I'm just going to start anywhere. He didn't have a list. He didn't go look up another book like this about what books he should read. He just looked at what mostly was on his bookshelf and what came to him that year. And what I love about that is it's sort of actually how we read. It's not the New York Times telling us which books. It's not us going back to the classics, although we all should. It's really what's there. How do we actually interact with reading in real time? And I love that take on this. That said, he had this thing, so you get to hear about each book he reads. So it starts, there's Master and Margarita, there's, he does Middlemarch, there's Anna Karenina, and then, I cannot remember the one that is hysterical, what he's, Confederacy of Dunces, actually, I've never been able to get into, and I read his essay on it, and then I wanted to. I don't remember, there's some cool thing in there where he kept putting it down, and this is what I love, where he said, I'm just not posh enough for this book, which is so what I feel like half the time I'm reading, but be able to hear him sort of cleverly and then go into depth about how books can actually make you feel out of your league, and then where we actually find home in a certain book. So it's just a very clever thing. That said, it's also an overall take on reading, which is what he did by reading 50 books in 1 year is he slowed down. And he did this thing where he started to look at life again as a narrative that is sort of connected, where there's threads, where how we look at the environment weaves in and out, which is what I think happens in reading, versus what's in front of me, what's in front of me, what's in front of me. And by slowing down and by sort of re-looking at life as a narrative, he discovered something very important that may or may not have saved his life. So that's the sort of pull to have you read the book.
That's
and it's really, really good. I mean, there really are titles on here that I had tried to get into some of these books that he also had struggled to get into, and maybe even thought that he had read them. Perhaps I'd done that. That I really was like, now I have to read that book. So again, the other thing for book groups is I think it would be really fun to read this book and then choose one of the essays that he talked about. And I'd be so curious about which people chose what. That would be a really interesting thing. And then read that book for your next group. So I really did love this. And there's something about British humor that it's a joyful book.